Alright everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Rayron, and today we're going to be doing something really special. We were able to go to an event at San Antonio Model Railroad Association. Scale Trains was on their road trip, and we were fortunate enough to go to one of their road trip events that came by to the club, and that's going to be this particular footage. Just wanted to lay out a few things. So the first part of the footage is basically me helping the founder of Scale Trains kind of set up their display, which was an awesome opportunity to actually see their lineup of products. And then also kind of the second half is their presentation on how Scale Trains came to be, and then the juicy Q&A session that happened. There's a lot of breaking news that kind of developed from this Q&A that I'm excited to share with you guys. And then kind of a little bit of a warning that the video, my GoPro ended up overheating, and so I had to record via my phone, so the footage is definitely shaky. So if you can't watch the video, then I deeply apologize. You can at least put it on audio, so that way you can enjoy the Q&A session that we had, but a lot of great information nevertheless, and enjoy.
Ooh, that's heavy.
Beautiful.
Huh? There'll be enough room for everybody? No. There's not going to be enough room. But that's not my problem. We end up having to do a second presentation.
If we need to.
Live stream it from the back.
It's okay, you can sit on the side. Oh, no thanks. I've been a puppet before.
You're looking too dumb to
I was
open
married
the package.
15 years. I know what it's like.
You can get that out.
That's alright. So there's a tab right here that pulls open,
okay.
and then there's these little cradles on the bottom. And those come off.
Oh.
Right in there. And
Excellent. Fan, AC, both ACs are on. Well, this one just turned off. It might be cool enough. Pretty cool enough.
It's cool. It's pretty cold outside. So.
Pretty chilly outside.
Well, that didn't work so well. Get into it's still in the package.
Oh, thank goodness.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Appreciate you guys help.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate you coming out. Not every day we get a CEO out here. Or a founder, I should say.
Yeah. I was just blessed to be in the right place at the right time.
That's good.
My 14-year-old has been losing his mind all day.
Yeah?
With all the trains everywhere.
Did he get to go to the show today?
Yeah, we went out there today and we're doing volunteering out there tomorrow. I was standing out there this morning, literally counting down the seconds until the show would begin.
Did you guys have a pretty good day?
Yeah, that was good. It was all empty.
Yep, those are perfect. All set. I'll get them out of the way.
For you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, the turbine. Nice.
Get another box here. Started.
Sneak by. Nope, you're good. You guys need to get the tooling for the coal turbine.
I would love to do that project. And it just so happens, I've been searching for 8 years. I found the builder's drawings recently.
Yes! That's great news.
Are we able to handle these?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, if you look at them close, you can tell they've been loved a lot.
beautiful. Oh yeah, this is definitely unlocked.
You guys I'm doing very well. You're fine. I'm just organized. Just put trying to get organized. You're welcome to look around and pick anything up. Cool, thank you. Trying to do it well.
I know your kids know better.
You're gonna be a special one.
We're doing on space. We're doing okay?
Okay. Oh, Eskel cabooses?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I saw your recent announcement on these on YouTube. Damn, nice. Oh, wow, look at that. Anything else, good sir?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hand that to you.
Oh, she does. Sometimes she does, and there's never. You never know.
There's a couple pieces there on the front.
These guys.
Yeah.
Sign up. Go
You have some entry forms out there if you would like to sign up with your name and your email address. You get
Back to
a
you.
Yep.
Got it?
goodie bag, and there's a hand. They're gonna have drawings from the forms you fill out for freebie stuff. So if you're interested, the forms are on the glass case out there.
T-shirts and koozies and hats.
Get that to you.
And there's an exclusive pin in there, a road trip pin. You can only get in the bag.
So you just want to keep these cool cars out like this so you can see the inside, or?
You can go ahead and take them all the way out.
Okay.
That wagon out of the way.
There's a lot of excitement for these cars, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's a neat car.
Yeah.
These guys right here. I figure what we do is we do a row freight cars all the way along the front.
Okay.
And then it kind of flattened out the locomotives. We'll pull those locomotives down this way.
Why not?
That should free up some space. Thank you very much. Yeah, I sure do. No, I haven't gotten that far yet.
Oh, beautiful, nice. Cool.
change to do that Great Northern SD45 I asked you about 3 years ago?
Not yet. Not yet, but we will.
Okay.
Can I see this one?
Sure. That's from our operator
I'd like to introduce Scale Trains. They're from Tennessee. We were contacted by Ellis. We still one empty chair over here.
We got a chair right here.
We were contacted by Ellis, and Ellis told me about Scale Trains was making a tour. I didn't see the email. We got on. Unfortunately, they had a cancellation in their schedule. They were able to work us in this weekend. What a surprise. I'd like to introduce to you guys Sean and Michelle Wilson. That's right. Once in a row. There. Anyway.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I want to give Phil a big thanks because he's pulled everything together in just a couple of weeks, and that's a really short window to do a meet and greet. And a really big group tonight. I want to thank you so much for being here. You know, my biggest fear in life is to have a meet and greet and nobody show up. So it's and what we're going to do tonight, I promise this is not going to be a Scale Trains infomercial. This is not going to be buy our trains, buy our trains. We're going to have some fun tonight. Some things we're going to do. Make sure if you haven't had an opportunity, once we get done, out on the display cases, we've got some giveaways. And so you want to put your name in the hat. There's some entry blanks. We'll give away some shirts, some hats, and some koozies. Michelle does a really good job right after the presentation of making sure that happens. And then up front here, we've got Scale Trains pens. We got rivet counter pens. And then I forgot too, the red bag outside on the counter. And if we run out, we got more in the truck. Just let us know. Is a unique, and you can only get in there, is the Scale Trains road trip pen that's in the bag. That's the red bag a lot of folks I see in the room have. And then inside that bag is the road trip t-shirt. It's a special one for the Gulf Coast. How to get one of those. And then there's some things from our partners and some other goodies in the bag as well. And then when we get done too, we'll hang around and answer questions. And you're welcome to come up and pick up the models and take a closer look. They've all been loved. You can't hurt them. If you look real close, you can tell. They've got some big grab irons and some other parts. So not a big deal. And then we're going to share our story. And this is nothing short of a miracle. It's about how we got started, how we got in the model railroad business, get a real inside look at that. And then we're going to go through the whole product development process. You'll actually get to see how the research process starts, how we do photography, how we go through design into tooling. And then we'll go back to the factory and we'll actually look at production and how model trains are made. And then we'll also have a Q&A at the end. You're welcome to ask questions as we go along. And you can ask me anything. I've been asked everything from why do you make model trains in China to why do model trains cost so much, to my personal favorite, why in the world did you pick that road name to do? So you want to answer those. And if you're not a member of the club, thank you for being here. I'm sure the club would love to have some new members. Make sure you get out and see the railroad when we get done. It is fantastic. I'll tell you what, this is in the top percentage of railroads that we've seen, and we've seen hundreds. This was beautiful. So make sure you get a chance to see the railroad tonight, and we'll shoot some video and photos too. And with that, we'll get started. And I think I'm short enough. You guys can probably see over me. And I'm going to introduce you to Mike Hopkin. This is Mike right here, and his wife Sylvia in the red. And you know, I could take you all the way back to when I was a little kid and bring you to this moment in time. But we don't have all night, and I don't want to bore you to tears. So we'll start with Mike and introduce you to Mike's family. At the time, this was when we started the idea of Scale Trains. Mike was the product development director at Athearn. In this next slide, there's Michelle and I and our kids and our family. And when we started this venture, I actually worked for the parent company of Athearn, which was Horizon Hobby, and I was the marketing manager for Athearn. And Mike and I, we traveled a ton together. In an average year, we'd travel about 15 weekends. We'd be gone 5 days at a time, and we got to be pretty good friends, got to know each other pretty well. And Mike would come from Southern California, where Athearn was at. I would come from Central Illinois, where Horizon was at. And in the summer of 13, we were at the National Train Show in Atlanta. And I have no idea how we got on the subject, but it was like, wouldn't it be really cool if we could start our own model train company? Well, yeah, that'd be great, right? But pretty big risk. Where would we ever come up with the money? All those kind of things. But it was that seed that got germinated. And in the fall of 13, I started working on a business plan. And you know, some of the things, it's the opportunity to live the American dream. Hope and pray it doesn't become the American nightmare, of course. It's our chance to chart our own direction. There were projects that we always wanted to do at Athearn that we could never get off the ground. And we thought, well, maybe this is a way to do some of those things. And then it's a chance to bring some innovations to market. You know, I told Mike, I said, at that time I'd been with Athearn and Horizon about 23 years. Mike had been there for over 15. And it's like, look, if we're going to leave the security of this job, let's not be another Me Too model railroad company. Let's do things to innovate. So how many, but there's a lot of hands. How many of you guys have ever built a blue box kit? Just about everybody in the room, right? And you put that back in the blue box, and you brought it to the club, and it shut around, and the couplers fell off. Happened to you? Sure.
Yeah.
So one of the little ideas we came up with was, well, what if we just made a box when you put your kit together that'll nest back in a plastic cradle, and it holds it safely, and you can take it to the club or wherever, and it'll be there in one piece when you get there. A little thing, but an innovation. Another thing we worked on were our brands, and we started with 4 brands. We started with Kit Classics to Operator, Rivet Counter, Museum Quality, and we were very defined in what the brands are to make sure that you know, we have something from the budget conscious modeler all the way up to someone who doesn't care what it costs, they just want the best. And so then another thing we did is we said, you know, Mike, and I'm gonna grab something here off the table.
Big blow.
We really worked on the technology side, challenged the product development team, and when the Big Blow turbine came out, it was groundbreaking. It had things like class lights that you could cycle between red, white, green, and off.
Yeah.
You had, of course, lit number boards, headlight, interior light for the cab. The control stand is lit with all the printed gauges on it. Had a ground light, that was first for its time. A backup light, and of course the tender. You had the B unit had the doors that open so you can actually see the turbine inside. The fan blade actually spins on the jet turbine.
And the noisiest
and then it
engine
has some other
ever.
features too, like as the locomotive goes through a curve and the wheels press up against the rail, you get a flange squeal sound. Or as the locomotive goes across a switch, or it goes over a diamond, the wheels drop into the frog and you get a frog clank sound. And so we were really kind of pushing the envelope with what we could do with the turbine. And then there was one more thing, and I didn't get it in the beginning. Mike's faith when we first started talking about scale trains, it was a lot stronger than mine. And thankfully Mike worked with me on that. But he kept saying, you know, Shane, God's bringing us together for a much higher purpose than making model trains. And I didn't quite get that at the time. Thank you. I didn't really get what that meant, and we don't really talk a lot about it, but we've been really blessed to give back to our local communities, to the model railroad community, to the prototype, to the historical museums, and we'll share something a little bit later that was pretty public. Well, you know, as we worked on that business plan, we kept waffling back and forth. It's like, where would we ever come up with the money? Do we really want to take this risk? But you know, as it went along, it started to make a lot of sense. And one of the things we had to do, you know, Mike knew product development. I knew the business side, the sales side, the marketing side, but you got to have somebody that could actually put the JB Hunt on the container, right, and put it in the right place and put all the lettering. So we decided to approach Joe Alvera. This is Joe right here. Joe was the art director with Athearn and worked in Southern California with Mike. This is Joe's family. You'll notice they were pretty young in this photo. And when we first talked to Joe, it was about 2 years before this picture was taken, so his kids were even younger. And Mike and Joe were going to go to a show, Train Fest in Milwaukee. And we told Joe that we want to meet with him after the show on Saturday, but he has no idea what about. We didn't give him any details. And so we went to the show, did the show, went to dinner, come back to my hotel room, and sit down with Joe. And I'm telling you what, I'm scared to death. We're rolling this out to Joe. I'm sweating bullets, thinking Joe's going to look at us and say, you guys have absolutely lost your mind. You know, after about an hour, I said, you know, Joe, what do you think? That fast, Joe says, I'm in. And I said, Joe, you should probably talk to your wife. I'm in. And I'm like, Joe, you really need to talk to Alexis. And Joe says, I'll convince her. And you know, but we were still kind of waffling and trying to decide, is this really what we want to do? And something happened in the very first day of 2014. If you've ever started a business, you know, I liken it to launching off an aircraft carrier. You burn a lot of cash, you come off the end of the carrier, it kind of drops down, and finally you get lift and you get cash flow. Well, our big thing was, you know, we had enough money, we could do the Big Blow turbine project, we could do the water tenders that kind of goes along with it, we could do the tank cars and operator rivet counter, and we could do the boxcar. But then we were out of money. There wasn't enough project after that we could keep the company going. Well, when I started with Horizon many, many years ago, I worked for the Stevens family.
I haven't left here.
And the Stevens family were salt of the earth, walk through fire kind of people that you love to work for, kind of people you would do anything for. And when they retired, they made us an employee-owned company as a thank you. So this very first business day of 2014, there's a global meeting for Horizon. And at that time, there were probably 700 employees across the globe. And when I say across the globe, not just the U.S., but like Hong Kong, China, Great Britain, England. That is Great Britain. Germany, France, Italy, you name it. All this, it's going to be at the exact same time. It never happened in the 23 years I'd been there. So you knew this was a really big meeting. And as we're in this meeting, we're finding out that as employee owners, that we're being bought out. And suddenly we go from having this much capital to having this much capital. I'm literally in that meeting texting Mike. I'm like, Mike, this is God telling us it's time to go. And that was the day we made the final decision that this is what we're going to do. So from there, a lot of things had to happen. You know, I mentioned that we traveled a lot. Well, from January through March, pre-COVID, we were gone just about every weekend of the year. And we in 2014, we found 2 weekends in a row that we were off. And we're going to go to China and find a tool or a design team, tool maker, production facility. And the good news is Mike had been going probably 15 or 20 years at that point. So we had a pretty good idea of who we wanted to work with. And these 2 weeks, this week, 2 weekends in a row, is right at the end of Chinese New Year. If you don't know what Chinese New Year is, that's where the factory shuts down for 2 weeks. It's a great time to go because they're kind of ramping back up, so things are kind of casual at that point. And anybody ever fly through Champaign, Illinois? There's usually a hand or two in the room. Yeah, there's a few. If you've ever flown through Champaign, Illinois, that's where Michelle and I were from. It is a tiny airport. There were 2 gates and 1 airline. That's American. And I'm going to fly on American over to Hong Kong. Mike's going to fly out of Southern California on United. He's going to fly over to Hong Kong. We're going to meet about 30 minutes apart, and then we're going to go into Hong Kong and go to mainland the next day. So I'm in the airport, and I'm getting ready for this trip, and I'm scared to death. I'd never been out of the United States. I've been to Canada, but that's USA light. I have ideas of what China's going to be like, where there's armed guards on every corner and military. It's not like that at all. But I'm in the airport, and I'm getting ready for this trip, and I'm nervous, of course. And I hear this very familiar voice, and it says to me, "Hey, Shane, what are you doing?" And I look up, and it is my boss's boss, the director of product development for Verizon. And I said, "Well, I'm going on vacation. What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm going to visit the factories in China." And I'm like, "Uh-oh."
Oh no.
A little bit longer. And sure enough, the #1 guy in RC Aircraft walks up, and he's going to China too. And then we talk a little longer, and I find out that on Mike's airline, United, is the #2 guy in the entire company, the vice president of Verizon, and he's going to China to visit the factories too.
Oh,
It's
no.
like, oh, we're sunk before we even get off the ground. And so, I get on the plane, get to Chicago, fly over to Hong Kong. It's 16 hours in the center seat. I had no status back then. So not only was it a miserable place to sit, but you got 16 hours to worry about not having a job when you get back. And so we get over to Hong Kong, and I literally go through customs with the Verizon people. I go to baggage claim. I get my bag, and I'm waiting for Mike to show up any minute. And I get my phone. I turn my phone on. And Mike's like, "Great news, my flight's been delayed 2 hours." I'm like, so the Verizon folks, they went on their way. Mike showed up, and we went into mainland China the next day, and it was amazing how quickly things lined up. We found the design team really quickly. You may have heard of a company called Sandakan. They closed not long before that we started our company, so we were hired some of their designers, found a tool maker, found a factory. All came together in about 4 days. We thought it would take a week.
Wow.
And so Mike says to me, "Shane, we got to take that vacation to Hong Kong that you were talking about." So Mike takes me to Hong Kong. He's a great tour guide. Gave me the 7-day trip in 24 hours. It was absolutely awesome. And so it's time to come home. We get to the Hong Kong airport, and thankfully nobody there that we know. And on the return trip, I'm going to fly through Narita back to Chicago and then home. And so, if you've ever worked a swing shift, my heart goes out to you. I don't know how you flip yourself. I was a mess. It's like 12 hours later in China. It's like 7 a.m. over there right now. And so I'm like, I'm wiped out. Want to get my notes typed up before I forget everything. And I pay the $50, go to the American Airlines lounge, and I'm sitting there and I'm typing up my notes, and I hear that familiar voice. And it says, "Hey, Shane, how was your vacation?" I'm like, "Let me show you the photos." And I showed him our trip to Hong Kong. It all worked out. Nobody was any the wiser. And so when we got back, we learned while we were in China the factory was going to be able to give us a lot more capacity. So we decided to approach Paul Ellis. This is Paul here and Paul's extended family. And Paul, in my opinion, is the best locomotive product developer in our industry. Back in the Ather days, he had the Jeep 38-2, the 40-2, the SDP 45, the bay window caboose. With us, he's had his hands in just about every locomotive project and several of the freight car projects. And Paul wasn't like Joe. He was a thinker about it. He was really worried, right? This is a pretty big risk. But a little backstory on Paul. He is a serious Southern Pacific modeler. If you're an SP guy, Paul's the guy to know because he would do SP and only SP if I'd let him. And Paul is super serious about the prototype. He could probably go out to his garage and build a real locomotive. To give an example, when we were working on the 40-2 project, the latches on the hood doors are a knuckle buster. They kind of come out, twist, and pull the door open. The factory couldn't draw that right to save their lives. So Paul literally went out to his garage, got a real knuckle buster latch, and shipped it to our factory so they could replicate it. That's how serious
Wow.
it was. And Paul, you know, being an SP modeler, the holy grail locomotive, of course, is the SD40T-2 tunnel motor.
Yeah.
And Paul's question finally comes to me. He's like, Shane, I've always wanted to do the ultimate tunnel motor that you can see through the grill and not see any of the drivetrain and has all the lighting effects, you know, and all those things. If I say yes to coming to Scale Trains, can I do that project? And I looked at Paul and I said, Paul, is that what it's going to take? He said yes, and I looked at Paul and I said yes, and that's how Paul did it. So from there, we had a lot to get done. We had about 6 weeks before we were going to leave Horizon and Athearn, and I challenged our guys with two things. I said, guys, number one, we don't walk out of the building with anything. Not one photo, not one drawing, not one book, nothing gets copied, nothing. And so we started from scratch. This is part of our library. We have over 1,000 books now. We have cases upon cases of builder's drawings, paint lettering diagrams, documentation of the prototype. And then we have a pretty big digital collection. We have about 750,000 images on our server. And it's kind of funny, when we first started the company, we were buying a lot of slides on eBay. And I was getting $100 expense reports. I mean, that's a lot of money for a slide. And I finally went to Mike and I said, Mike, why are we spending so much money on slides? Well, after some research, we found out Mike and Paul were bidding against each other, so we put
Oh no!
So now Mike does all the slide buying. But if you have a slide collection and you've always wanted it digitized, we'll do that for you for free. All we ask is we keep a digital copy of your collection. We'll give you originals back and give you a digital copy as well. If that's
a good
something
deal.
you'd like to do, see Michelle or I afterwards. And if you're a digital shooter and would like to work with us on projects, see one of us as well. We're always looking for help. You know, we're experts in certain areas. We can't be experts in everything. There's too many areas, too many road names. And the other thing I told the guys, I said, you know, Athearn and Horizon have been great to us. And they're going to lose 4 key employees. We can't leave them high and dry. So at that time, I was doing all the production planning for Athearn. So I got us out a full year on production planning. Mike and Paul finished up some extra tooling projects, so there were some new projects in the pipeline. And Joe got the art team an extra couple of months ahead. And so there was a plan in place, up to them if they wanted to follow it, but at least we didn't leave them in a bad place. And then we left on May the 2nd of 2014, and on May 5th, it was absolutely game on. So how many of you guys would love to place a pre-order from a company you've never heard of that's promised you the best product ever? Yeah, I don't see that either. And so in the very first business plan, on the very first page, it talks about how when we make a new product announcement, you're going to see it, touch it, hold it, hear it, feel it, so you know that that product's not vaporware. At that point, when you're seeing it and touching it, we've already spent the money, so it's definitely going to happen. So right away, we went to Union, Illinois, and we documented the number 18 turbine. It's got the larger tender, and then we also documented the tender the turbine the very next week in Utah, and that's got the smaller tender. And that's our son there in the top. He's grown a lot since then. And we also did a family vacation to Yellowstone, and we documented the water tenders there. And to kind of give you an idea, this is a pretty big, tall order that we've got in front of us. So for a locomotive project, from the time we say, yes, we're going to do this and get started on the research in earnest, to delivery is normally 3 years. For a freight car, it's about 18 to 24 months. So we're going to take 2 complicated locomotives, which is the A and the B on the turbine. We're going to take the tender, that's a complicated freight car because it's got electronics in it. We're also going to do the operator rivet counter tank car, we're going to do the box cars, and we're going to do the water tenders. And we're going to do all that in 18 months. That is a big chore to make that happen. So let's take a look and see what it takes in the development process. Am I in the way? Can you guys see all right? I can get off to the side.
You're fine.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So when this comes up, puberty again. So when this comes up here in a second, no, I'm good, thank you. When this comes up, you're going to see all of us around the table. There's a lot more of us in product development now, so it's a little more complicated than this. But you'll see all the books out on the table. You'll see hard drives. We're gathering every piece of information that we can possibly get on whatever that project is. And we'll sit down, we'll talk about it, figure out if there's somewhere we need to go out and measure a real locomotive, real freight car, if there's that opportunity. To different trucks. I mean, there's a million different variations. For the 40-2, I could stretch my arms this wide and it won't go as wide as the columns for that many details. That's how crazy it is. And so we'll do that early 1970s for every single order. And then we'll come back in the late 70s, early 80s, do all that again to make sure that the details really haven't changed that much. And then pre-BNSF merger, right, late 90s, or I'm sorry, late 80s, early 90s, somewhere in that neighborhood. Now you got to start looking at it by road number. So you've got to have walk-around images of this whole locomotive and all the small pictures too to get like the warning labels, those kind of things, because it's going to really start to change just before the BNSF merger. Then you're going to come back after the BNSF merger. You're going to do that again, and then so now you're going to do it again around the 2000s, 2010s, and then today. So at least 6 times you're going to look at that locomotive and see how it's morphed over its life. And it's going to change a lot. And to kind of give you an idea on the 40-2 project, one of the questions we get a lot is, man, you guys haven't done 40-2s in quite a while. Well, when we started the company, you know, product development, they want to add detail, add detail, add detail. And me as the finance guy, I'm like, we need to make some money. So we said, we did 7 production runs, and we did enough tooling to create 7 runs. And then we said we'd have to go back and create new. So for the last 3 years, we've been working on the 40-2. And we started, of course, with research. Then we went to design. Tooling is done. The next run of 40-2s are actually, the samples are being made now. And when we make this announcement, we'll be able to do 40-2s every 6 months, literally for the next 20 years, and not repeat the same road name, paint scheme, or era if we wanted to. That's how much variety is coming. And I believe this will be the most expensive HO locomotive ever done. Between the first group of tooling, second group of tooling, and all the development costs, we'll have $750,000 invested in the 40-2 project.
Holy crap.
So that's how serious we take it. And there's the turbine sheet. You can see how that works. Mike's going to make a little cameo appearance here in a minute. He likes to go to the desert in Southern California. Gets out pretty regularly. You never know when you'll get a stray like a CP engine out there. And while we're traveling too, we try to get out and do some photography as well. Once we finish that research package, then it's on to our design team in China. This is our actual design team. We have 6 full-time CAD engineers that work for us, plus their manager, Benny. This is Benny here, and there's a GEVO on his screen. And when it gets bigger here in a second, you're going to see, look at all the different colors. Every single one of these colors is an individual part. And every one of those parts is hand applied. There's no robots that put together a locomotive or a freight car. And then we can look at the inside. We can do things like the trucks. We can see what kind of radius it's going to turn. We can also do, look at all the interior. I want to point out the motor. That's the big gray part right there in the middle. I talked about innovations. We had all of our motors, our only motor, custom designed for us. So for the maximum pulling power, maximum torque, as well as the power curve. And you'll also notice the motor sits down in the fuel tank. What that's doing is it's lowering the center of gravity, helps with your pulling power. Yep. And the really big thing here is the drivetrain. You'll notice the drivetrain is almost perfectly straight across. All other manufacturers are going to be at an angle. You lose power or energy getting to your gear tower, so you lose some pulling power with your locomotive. And then some other things, that's where the speaker housing is. You can actually see the dynamic brakes inside because you can see through the grills of the GEVO. You can see the cab interior. Once we sign off on the design, then it's off to tooling. We have a CNC machine that can actually cut down to N scale. But the thing is, you can't get 90-degree corners and you can't get the super minute details. We'll talk about that in a second. We cut hardened steel. A lot of manufacturers use aluminum. It's a lot less expensive, but it heats up in the manufacturing process and it'll actually distort over time. So steel won't do that. And then these are copper electrodes. And you saw the machine cutting the electrodes. This is the SD45 project. There's 5,000 electrodes on the floor there. It took 7,000 to make that project. And what's happening is it's actually passing an electric current down through the copper electrode and into that steel tool. As it goes up and down, it's literally burning that design into the tool. And if you get a chance, when you look at like the end ladders on the turbine, there's little dimples on the inside, which are rivets. It takes 3 of those copper electrodes to burn in 1 rivet. That's why it takes so many with the minute details. This is an actual tool. This is a truck tool, both the positive and negative. That's what will go into the molding machine and make the truck. This is die cast tooling down here in the bottom. Works exactly the same as plastic tooling. And then this is the actual tool itself. That's called the mold base.
Yeah.
Those tool parts will go into that mold base, and that's what will go into the molding machine. And we'll see that a little bit later.
So how long do those copper anodes last?
What they'll do is they'll keep a project for about 4 years in case we want to make tooling changes or anything like that, and then they'll melt them all down and reuse them. Yeah. Yep. So one of the big things that had to happen for us in that 18 months, as well as preparing the products, is Michelle and I, we had to move our family. So the folks in California, they don't enforce non-compete agreements, but they do in Illinois. So we had to move 150 miles or so, and we decided, look, if we're going to move 150, we're going where we want to go, and that's how we ended up in the mountains of Tennessee. And this is shot from our house. This is our farm ground, and that little building went for sale the day after we moved in. And Michelle says, Shane, you need to go look at that. I'm like, nah, I really don't want to do that. We got all this farm ground. I'm not a farmer. Let's look and see about building a nice building on our land, and then that way if the business doesn't make it, I get a really nice pole barn out of the deal. And I got those bids in, and oh my goodness, it was way more than we could afford. So for the ladies in the room, I hung my head in shame. I said, you're right, I need to go look at that building. I went across the street, and Michelle was right. See, I admitted it. And we actually bought the building, and we totally gutted it. The only thing that's original is the structural steel and the concrete. And we actually bought the land right up this side, which is where the loading dock is at. So we ended up with about 2,700 square feet and 7 acres in the mountains of Tennessee.
That's not your new facility, is it?
No, that's not our new one. That's our original. You'll see the new one here in just a little bit. Yep. And one of the things that we did, right as we were finishing construction, with 3 weeks to go to announce the company, we had Barry Silverthorne, that's Barry in the top corner from Trainmasters TV, come and do a documentary with us. And it basically looks like it takes the 18 months that we did, a couple of trips to China, although we did one, we made a little magic there, a little Hollywood magic. And so Barry comes, and we had the guys come from California, Mike, Joe, and Paul. We had Matt from ESU come, and we had some other folks to do the video with. And when Barry came down on that, he came down on a Tuesday, we shot on a Wednesday, and he keeps telling me all day on Wednesday, he's like, Shane, we need drama. We got to do something to keep these people engaged so they'll watch the whole documentary. And I'm like, man, Barry, I'm a train guy. You don't get much more boring than me. And he keeps saying, Shane, we got to keep these people engaged. Well, we finish up the shooting on that Wednesday, and there's nothing really, crazy that happens. But the factory solves that the very next morning. So with less than 3 weeks to go, I get this call from our project manager, Andy. And if you get a call in the morning from China, that's night their time, you know it's bad news, because they would prefer to keep you up late, so they'll call you in the morning. And I answer the phone, and it's Andy, and he's like, I have bad news. And I was like, yeah, I was kind of expecting that. And so we're going to have 8 turbines to show at the show, plus all the other product, because we want you to be able to see it, touch it, hold it, all that good stuff. Andy's calling to tell me that they have literally almost finished all 8 turbines, and 7 of the 8 are wrong, and there's absolutely nothing they can do to fix them in time for the show.
Oh,
and it's
no.
like, holy smokes. So I tell Andy, I said, the guys are here from California. Let us regroup, and we'll call you back in a few minutes and see if we can come up with some kind of solution. So they show up along with Barry, and Barry walks in. I'm like, Barry, grab your camera. I've got some drama for you. And Barry captures it live. If you've never seen this, by the way, we just secured the rights to it. It'll be live on YouTube next Friday night, and it'll be free. You won't have to get behind the paywall to get it. And so Barry films it. We discuss what we're going to do, and decide that Joe's a wizard at Photoshop. The factory's going to make 1 correct body. We're going to Photoshop it on 7 so the digital images are right. We only have 1 locomotive to show, which is really disappointing.
Oh, man.
But that's, sometimes you got to play the hand you're dealt. And so, yeah, that was another uh-oh.
Yeah, what was the uh-oh?
Yeah. And so we the next day we get on the plane, we go to Hong Kong, arrive on Saturday night. Sunday we go into the factory, and we're expecting to take 1 of everything home. And also they're going to ship 300 Chicago Northwestern boxcars, air freight, for the show to sell, and they're going to give us 300 Scale Trains boxcars to give away. So as you're touring the factory, you would expect to kind of see your stuff in different places through the factory, and it's nowhere to be found. And I keep asking Mike, Mike, where's our stuff? Mike, where's our stuff? And we get down to the end, and I finally look at our factory owner and I say, basically, where's our stuff? And in this great deep Chinese voice, he looks at me and goes, Shane, we have a meeting tomorrow. And I walk in on Monday morning, and there's like 15 Chinese folks around the table. The only people that speak English are myself and Barry and Mike and the factory owner and the project manager. And this was my baptism by fire in Chinese culture. If you've never experienced Chinese culture, if you think I talk with my hands, these guys land airplanes for a living. And their idea of personal space is about right here, nose to nose, and loud. Man, you think I'm talking loud tonight? And so they all around the room are like department heads, and you hear all this talk in Chinese, and hands are waving, and people are in each other's face. I was kind of hiding, kind of like Bear, like I was afraid somebody's gonna be killed that day. And by lunchtime, the factory owner looks at me and says, Shane, you take everything home this week. And I'm like, how in the world are you going to do that? Well, it was pretty amazing. Monday afternoon, they took and they molded the correct turbine bodies. Tuesday morning, they were doing sub-assemblies. By Tuesday afternoon, they were in paint. Wednesday morning, they were in print. And by Wednesday afternoon, they went 24/7 all the way to Saturday, finished up everything they were supposed to finish.
Wow.
Got the 600 box cars ready and air freighted on that Friday. So in less than 2 weeks to the show, we had everything that we needed. And so then the night right before the show, we had a preview party, and we were absolutely blessed. We had about 70 people from the industry, folks like Rayron Model Craftsman Magazine, Model Railroad, those kind of folks. And then what was even more important to us, we had 35 of our family members for our 4 families come from across the country to celebrate as we announced the company. The next morning, we had the booth wrapped. And when the show opened, we pulled the curtains back, and then we had to get product made. So now we'll take another trip back to the factory and see the manufacturing process. So this is virgin plastic. We can also use what's called regrind plastic. Those are things when maybe the molding doesn't go right. This is one of only 2 robots in the entire factory. And the only thing this robot does is it goes into the molding machine, picks up a part, drops it in a bin box. Everything else is done by a human. So this next scene, you'll see an operator running a molding machine, and when he's working on C39-8s, when he takes that out of the mold, you're going to see him inspect it, looking to make sure there's no short shots. That's where the plastic doesn't flow the way it's supposed to. That's how you end up with regrind. From there, it'll go to sub-assembly, and then to paint. You'll notice we use an automotive gun. If you've ever tried to weather with an automotive gun, you'll know it's impossible, and that's why we don't do weathering. All of it, the paint is done by hand, and then we're going to see a big rack here. So this rack is probably about yay big, and it's a metal rack, and you'll see these strips that run down the rack, and there are horns on there. So what we do is they'll put masking tape, I'll say that fast, sticky side up, and then they'll take the detail part and they'll put it on the sticky masking tape. Have you ever got a body and you're looking at it and you're going, well, my body color is different than my detail part colors? I see some heads nodding in the room. Yeah, so it's like painting a house, right? You don't paint your bedroom, you don't go buy 2 gallons of paint, run out of paint, go buy another gallon because the shades are probably going to be off. So what we do is we paint all the parts at the same time that we're painting the bodies. Now the crazy thing that has to happen here is once these come out of paint and they dry, and this works for any kind of part, they got to take all those horns off, or whatever part that is, take the masking tape off, put new masking tape on, sticky side up, and then they got to flip these horns over because they're only painted on one side. So they'll flip the horns over and then run them back into paint, and they'll bring them back and they'll be all painted. So this next scene might be a little hard to see in the back, but these are grab irons. And there's a young lady off screen. You'll see that there's a long leg on each one. She's literally got a pair of tweezers, and one by one she's sticking all those in the foam. And so that way all the grab irons can be painted at the same time as well. When it comes out of paint, they'll snip off the long leg, and there's like bins and bins and bins of different colors of grab irons that go to specific projects. This is masking, and in a moment you'll see a Chessie SD40-2. And if you look at the edges, it looks terrible. It looks like somebody beat that thing with a ball-peen hammer. What's really important is the edges in the middle where the vermilion's being painted, where the stripe goes. You need that to be super crisp. So you'll see him keeping pressure as he works along. And when he finishes, he's going to take a moment. He's going to look at that body and make sure the paint didn't run. If the paint ran, that body, if he can get it off right away, you can save it. But if not, it has to be scrapped. This is my favorite scene in the whole video. This is the DM&E Mount Rushmore SD40-2, and the Mount Rushmore logo has 9 colors on it. This machine is applying 5 colors. You'll see Mount Rushmore kind of come into play as it comes across. And then it's going to go over to another machine to add the ribbon. When she takes it off here in a moment, she's going to put another one on the jig, and then she's going to grab a magnifying glass. Have you ever got a model, and you're looking at your model, and the logos, maybe they're fuzzy around the edges, the printing's fuzzy. I see some heads there. Yep. So what that means is that's not in register. So all 5 of those colors have to lay on top of each other perfectly, or you'll get a fuzzy edge. If she sees a fuzzy edge, she's got to throw that body away, recalibrate the machine, and start over. Now the crazy thing is, I mentioned there's 9 colors, so there's 5 on this one. Now it's got to go to another machine and lay 4 more colors on top of that. So those additional 4 have to lay perfectly, and if they don't, the body's scrapped. And that's what it looks like when it's finished.
That's crazy.
And then from there, it's to final assembly. They wouldn't let us shoot much on the final assembly line, so we're going to have to use our imagination a little bit. And it works the same way. So you got locomotive bodies, you got freight car bodies, you've got mechanisms, and so you've got this table. And behind you are one of those, stacked up. And we're going to pick on locomotive bodies for a minute. And then you got this little table here, and you got some parts. And then there's a long, narrow table, probably 100 plus feet long. And kitty corner from it's another little table. And kitty corner from that's another table. And what happens is this first guy reaches back, gets his body, grabs the part, puts the part on, sets it in the middle. The next guy grabs their part, grabs the body, puts the part on, sets it in the middle. Next guy, okay, you guys get the theme there, until it goes all the way down to the end of the line, and that particular mechanism, freight car, locomotive body is finished. Now, for mechanisms, they're actually going to, before they mate that with the locomotive body, they're going to take it to a room and they're going to test all the lighting functions, going to test all the sound functions, and then more importantly, they're actually going to shut the locomotive sound off so you can listen for any kind of gear train noise, any kind of binding in the drivetrain, something wrong with the motor, and that way it can be fixed before it leaves the factory. After this stage, it goes to final packaging, and in final packaging, it's going to get its label, it's going to get its manual, it's going to get a final one last inspection before it leaves the factory. You'll see somebody actually cleaning a model here in a moment to make sure there's no fingerprints. They'll write them with grease pencil on them, so you got to make sure you get the grease pencil off. We use vellum to make sure that as the body shifts in transit that it doesn't rub off the paint. And then we ship full container load. You'll notice here we use plastic pallets now. This is an actual container that's coming to us. We normally ship either Yantian port in China or Hong Kong through the Panama Canal up to Savannah, Georgia, and then from Savannah it's trucked to us in Tennessee. So we're going to look at what it looks like on the other side of the ocean. So this is our son, about 18 months after the last picture you saw. And what was really awesome back then is he was unpaid, but for some reason he wants paid now, and I don't get it. When we got our first shipment, it was boxcars, and we were pretty much run out of money at that point, so we had to set everything on the floor. And you'll notice here that we have cardboard pallets. Well, let me set up the next scene for you because it's crazy. Well, when we got our second shipment, it came in March of 16, and when we got that shipment, something horrible happened. Mike came from California. He was going to help me QA, and we're getting tank cars, a unit train tank car. And the guy who ordered these was absolutely crazy. He ordered like 8,000 or 9,000 rivet counter cars, ordered like 3,000 or 4,000 operator cars, way too many. That guy was me. He had no idea what he was doing at the time. And, and we get this shipment. In those days, we would do less than container load, and we would do land bridge. So that means we would come into Southern California, put it on rail, bring it over to like Memphis, to Atlanta or Nashville, and then it would get trucked up to us. Well, this particular shipment, when it left China, it was on 5 skids. And those skids, I mentioned those cardboard pallets, well, when it got to Long Beach, it was set in water. And what happens to cardboard? It disintegrates.
No.
So a really nice forklift driver, about yay high, and you can see the holes there, skewers all 5 pallets, and he takes the pallets and he goes over and he sets 2 of them on wood pallets, which was really nice of him. But then he takes the wet stuff and puts on the dry stuff, and then
It leaks
he did that for 2
through.
pallets, and the other 3 pallets he was like, I've had enough of this. Literally threw it in a 53-foot dry van and delivered it. Mike and I were away getting the pallets to put them on the floor, And so Michelle calls me. She's like, "You guys got to get here right now." And I'm like, "What's going on?" And she's like, "Well, the shipment just got here and it's a mess." So we race back. We get there, and I mean, our hearts broke. And so some crazy things had to happen. We decided that we were going to do the operator cars first, and that way we could get some cash flow going. And so we get with our church. Our church comes, and we play this game called Shake the Box. Shake the box. If it rattles, put it in this pile. If it doesn't rattle, put it in this pile. We'll inspect the boxes that don't rattle first.
Oh my
Hopefully we can get
gosh.
enough to cover pre-orders and we'll ship. Well, as we start doing that, we realize that this is actually, believe it or not, a blessing in disguise. Because what we learn as we're going through and we're testing all the models is that the bolsters or the coupler height is off by 0.010 of an inch too short. And we didn't learn for months later, but what happened was we sent the factory a KD height gauge. You know, that's the standard, right?
Yeah.
And it's factory sealed. So all they have to do is put it together, and somehow they got another manufacturer's coupler, and they stuck it in the gauge. Well, now they're all off 10,000s. So now we've got to shim all 12,000 tank cars.
Oh
And so
my
we start with the
gosh.
operators, and we put an email out on a Monday night to our newsletter list, and it was really great. Tuesday we start to get some folks who volunteered to come in from across the country. The local model railroad came, our club came, our church came, and for about a week we worked on the operator cars. We got them done and got them shipped out. Well, during that time frame, I sent James Wright, JLWI 2000 on YouTube, a bunch of cars that he could do a review on. So the whole idea was when we finished the rivet counter cars, he could drop the review and life's great and we sell all the cars, right? That's not how it works. So the operator cars have plastic couplers. The rivet counter cars have die-cast couplers. And James calls me and he says, "Shane, these cars won't stay coupled." And I'm like, "James, what are you talking about?" And he tells me what he's doing. So I set up this Lupatrack because there was nothing in our office at the time. And it's like playing Thomas, right? I had a car, about 10, 12 cars into it. If you go as fast as you can go and then stop, a slack action happens and the car's uncoupled. And it happens every single time.
Oh my
So now all
goodness.
these unit train cars that we have need new couplers. Well, it just so happens the very next week, Mike and I are going to China. So we get a hold of the factory and we say, "Hey, we need new couplers ready when we get there so we can test them." And we get over there and they have a new coupler ready for us. And we start playing with this coupler and it's really stiff. And then about 30, 45 seconds, it's the silkiest, smoothest coupler you ever felt. And then the pin falls out.
Oh
And the pin
no.
falls out. There's a theme. The pin always falls out. So we send the designers, they work through the night, they come back the next morning, they've got another design for us, and they've now got a conical shaped knurled or bumpy pin that goes in. So as you open and close it, it drives the pin into the coupler. That solves it. So they make 20,000 couplers. I put it in my carry-on bag and bring it back to the U.S. You should get through customs with that. It's all right.
Oh man.
Got back to the States, and we had 2 weeks worth of help lined up. We had people coming in. We'd have probably half a dozen folks a day for that 2 week period. Mike, Joe, and Paul came from California. Our church helped, Michelle, our kids, everybody. And we were working 18-plus hour days for that 2 weeks. And we got through just about all the cars, but about 1,500, and we ran out of help. And so that very first Monday, it's just Mike, Joe, Paul, myself, and Michelle's running back to the warehouse with cars. And, you know, it was rough. If you've ever worked 2 weeks in your life, 18 hours a day, you know how worn out you are. That very first day, we got a whopping 100 cars done. And that evening, I get a call from Mark, who's the local Model Railroad Club president. He says, "Shane, how's it going?" I'm like, "Mark, we're dying. We did about 100 cars today. That means we're at least 2 weeks away from getting this done. I don't know how we're ever going to finish." And he says, "Let me see what I can do, and I'll call you back." So he calls me back a little later. He says, "I found some help. We'll be up tomorrow morning." So Mark shows up on Tuesday morning. He's got like 12 or 15 people with him, the most people we'd had at any one point. And we get to work on the cars. And we bring in lunch, bring in dinner. And after dinner, I'm like, "Guys, you've been here all day. You've got families. It's at least an hour drive for you. You probably got to work tomorrow. Go home. Really appreciate all the hard work. We've got about 300 or so cars left, and we'll get them done." And they're like, "We're staying." And it's like, "We can't ask you to stay." And they're like, "No, we're staying."
That's awesome.
And it's like, well, you know, we really appreciate it. Well, we're not going to turn down the help, but, and so we worked, and about 1 or so in the morning, we finished up the 300 cars.
Wow.
Well, I tell this story, and one of the reasons for the road trip and why clubs are so important to us is this, and they didn't know this at the time. If you've ever owned a business, you know that credit card deposits take 2 days to hit your bank account. Well, see, these guys stayed till 1 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday, which meant Wednesday when we came into the office, we could actually bill pre-orders. So when we billed those pre-orders, that deposit hit on Friday. that Friday just happened to be payroll. If that deposit hadn't hit, we wouldn't have had enough money for payroll, and we'd have been out of business, and that's how close we came.
Oh, wow.
Thank God we've been really blessed since then, and a lot of amazing things happen. Not to say we haven't had our share of challenges, but there's some fun things too. And I mentioned that anytime we get a chance, we're out shooting photography. You know, you can never know when you get something unique like that BNSF locomotive with the hood door. And then something fun that we did this Hiawassee River Rail adventure. We had 240 guests come in from 25 states and 4 countries. And we also brought a lot of special guests in, like Pele Soberg, and we did a train ride. And we did that in 2019, I believe. Yeah, in 2019. And when we wrap up the road trip, we're going to do it again. I think this time we're probably going to do a steam excursion out of Chattanooga. And if you guys would love to come, we'd love to have you come and visit with us. Pele's already agreed to come back and do clinics for us.
Wow.
Nice.
And we'll have a lot of other special guests and a lot of fun things. And probably will happen in late 24, early 25. And the next thing here is the Spirit of is in Ravenna. We were there when 2716 went back, and while that's not probably a significant event here, it was a big deal for us because that's how we got connected to CSX. And we got the inside track on the Pride and Service program. And so for CSX, if you don't know what Pride and Service is, that's where they honored military, first responders, and police and their families. And they created 3 locomotives, and on those 3 locomotives are 5 charities. And I talked about giving back at the beginning. Well, if you bought any or all of these locomotives, we want to give you the biggest thank you in the world because you made a difference in people's lives. We were able to donate to all the 5 charities on these locomotives $7,000 each for a total of $35,000.
Oh, nice.
So thank you for helping make a difference. That's awesome. That's for you guys. So another thing we got to do is we got to chase the big boy, and while we were doing that, we learned that the 4014 we acquired from MTH is wrong, and we got to go to Cheyenne and make it right.
Oh, no.
The road trip is going on now, and we thought the road trip, we do maybe 1 or 2 dates a state. So, you know, 7,500 dates. We'll finish 75 dates on this trip, and we think before it's all said and done, we'll have over 200 dates. So it's actually going to go well into 24 for us. So then, and then a little bit about the present and the future.
MTH.
So we get a lot of questions. Fox Valley Models we acquired back in June of last year,
Yeah.
and we acquired the HO and their N tooling. If you're an N scaler, the big news here is for locomotives, you can be able to get DCC and sound pre-installed from the factory. And I'm sure you love putting those tiny detail parts on an N-scale locomotive. So what we'll do is we'll paint those, we'll put them on the model, it'll all be done, just take it out and run it. And then we also acquired MTH a little over 2.5 years ago. And I still go to bed at night hearing Mike's voice saying, "Shane, you have no idea what we're getting into." And I'm like, "Mike, it can't be that bad."
Yeah.
To give you an idea, we acquired about 800 tools in HO and S scale.
Cool.
And it takes
That's
about
huge.
4 hours to test one tool.
Oh,
so you can do
wow.
the math there and see why one of the reasons it's taken so long. We get a lot of questions about steam locomotives, and another thing that happened, so on the steam locomotives, all the side rods, those stamped metal parts,
Yep.
we didn't get the tooling for that. We
Oh,
did the engineering for it. So we had to recreate all the engineering and the stamp parts. So it's taken us a ton longer. We've worked with ESU though. The motherboards are done. We've also got the smoke units, they're done. They've got the Loke Sound 5 boards are ready. And the good news is, in March, we will get our first running sample. And that's going to be the Norfolk and Western J. If it all goes well, we'll make the announcement of the J and the matching passenger cars in the first 6 months of this year. If it doesn't go well, God knows when, unfortunately.
Oh, no.
And then after that, you'll start seeing like the some of the on the short list are the Daylight, the
Yay.
Challenger, the Berkshire, the Mikado, and we'll cycle through all of the MTH steam locomotives over time.
That's
And
great.
then after that, we'll start to work on the diesel locomotives. And then you'll also see on the
GS4
table
next.
the first S-scale samples from S-Helper service. We revived the S-Helper brand. And then you'll also see the first samples of some Kit Classics cars that came from the MTH train set line. And then we'll be bringing out more as that goes along. And then some other things to talk about. We now, and I just changed this slide, I should have done that today. We now have 22 team members in 5 states, so we've grown a lot. We regularly receive new product shipments. That's what's really helped us turn the corner financially. And then something that's really crazy. So if you set aside MTH and you set aside Fox Valley Models, in HO and N scale right now, we're investing $1 million a year in brand new tooling. There is a ton of new product in the pipeline, so there's a
Yay.
lot coming. And then this year we're going to announce some new customer-focused services, including a loyalty program. And we're also going to have a club program, which you guys will love. We'll announce later this year.
Nice.
And then somebody mentioned our new warehouse and office. This is our new warehouse and office. In the old building, Michelle and I and our operations manager all shared the same office. And that was small. And so now we all have our own office. We got plenty of space and have been very blessed with this new building. It's about 30 minutes from where the old building was. And then we've got a lot more surprises coming over the next few years. And with that, that's all I have. So I'll open it up to Q&A. Anything you guys want to ask a model train manufacturer? And it just takes one person to be brave and jump in. I'll go here and I'll go there.
So what made you initially go with the ESU decoder? Because I know in my YouTube community there's a lot of controversy with to use ESUs because you got to buy like an additional local program to get the full functions of it. So why did your company go with that particular manufacturer?
Okay, well first you don't have to have a local program. It helps a lot, but you don't have to be able to program. But going back in time, when Soundtracks was working on the Tsunami 2, we were at Athearn and we had the inside track on that. And we met with Soundtracks at in January of 14, and we had two motives. One was to get for Athearn was to see if Soundtracks would send blank boards to China and let us program blank boards in China. Because for Athearn, what they would do is they would program in Colorado and then ship. Well, like at the GP30 shipment, that means you would have like 15 different boards for all the different lighting functions, all the different sound functions. So you would have boards in China for years that you would never use, the leftover boards, because you have to have so many for spoilage or defective. And we were really working with Soundtracks to try to convince them that that's the way we wanted Athearn to go. And also for us, we knew in that meeting that if Soundtracks would go that way, then we would really weigh, do we go with ESU or do we go with Soundtracks? Okay. ESU was really up and coming at that point and is now the leader in DCC and sound. But ESU, we buy blank boards. They can literally ship us next day to our factory in China. We get a blank board, we program that board at our factory, and then whatever's left over just becomes the next project's board because it's blank. So we decided, rather than having literally hundreds of thousands of dollars tied up in boards, that we would tie that money up in tooling. And that's how we ended up with the ESU.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Two questions. One, when are you going to come out with the next road numbers or road names in GP30?
We will announce the next group of Jeep 30 road names probably mid-year this year.
Conrail?
I think Conrail's in that bag, yes.
Okay, and you talked about how about the E4, the electrics? MTH electrics.
Yeah, we will get to the MTH electrics. We'll do the bipolar and we'll do the Little Joe. And
how about the E44s?
Well,
that's not been answered.
That was something that they didn't do, not on our short list.
Okay.
And then I saw a hand right here.
Yes. Have you investigated the use of 3D printers in any of your manufacturing processes?
Good question.
Yeah, 3D printing in manufacturing, it's not there yet. It's slow. And one of the challenges is compound curves. It's gotten a lot better. What I see 3D being used for the unique detail parts, but it's just not quite there yet. Yeah, it'll get there though, and it'll save us a ton of money. Other questions? Anything else anybody wants to know?
Any estimated price on a J-Class locomotive?
Not until we get the samples.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
What made you decide to go with the same scales, like a HO?
Why HO and N? HO by far is the big beast, right? I mean, that's where most of the sales are. N scale's the one that's right behind it. With HO, there were a lot of things we wanted to do. We wanted to do a rivet counter level 40-2, -9. We wanted to do the turbine. All those projects we wanted to do at Athearn, and we could never get off the ground, but we knew they were money makers. And so being an HO, it gave us some places in the market we could go right away. And then in N, I think we were probably a little ahead of the curve with all the railroad road number error specific, but the market's caught up to us at this point. Yes, sir.
What's the best way to go about programming one if you don't want to invest in the money? Like on his Jibo, he wants to get rid of the momentum, and the sound is really low.
You can do it through the CVs. The best thing to do is call Mark in product support while you've got the locomotive, and he can walk you through step by step what CVs to change.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, because I've talked to some people and they're like, oh, change this one, change that one, and I haven't had any success.
Yeah, Mark.
But I've cranked the volume up as far as I think I can do it.
Okay, is it an ET44 or is it an ES44?
He's got it right here. ES.
It's an ES.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it's the same thing on the as well. It's like at home it sounds a little bit better because it's not as loud, but here, like everybody's running, everybody's talking. I can't hear it. I don't know where it's at.
Yeah, Mark's the guy.
Okay.
At home, good tracks.
I saw a hand back this way. Yes.
How will the smoke work with the steam engines? Like, will it be synchronized with the sounds, or will it have force behind it, like the MTH smoke units used to be? Are they going to be the same?
Yeah,
Haven't seen it yet. It's an ESU designed smoke unit, and we'll get that when we get the locomotive side. Don't know the answer to that just yet.
ESU smoke,
ESU
that's
designed
new.
it though, based on what they've done in Europe, so it should work really well. Yes, sir.
So it sounds like becoming a manufacturer has a ton of learning curve. Have you guys found kind of a sweet spot where you're kind of able to figure out things a lot more smoother now and faster? Or is it just
I wish.
constant?
Yeah.
You know, you would think 4 guys with 140 plus years of experience in the hobby and the industry would have a clue. No. You know, as we grow, and there's some areas it gets better and some areas it doesn't. We are having a product development summit in April. We've gone through some pretty big challenges in the last year. We haven't talked a lot about it. You might have seen the video, but we scrapped a couple of entire production runs at our expense because of some mistakes that we've made. And as we've grown, our processes haven't grown with us. So in April, we're actually going to be totally reinventing how we do product development. In fact, we'll be hiring I think we'll be the only ones in the industry that will have an archivist whose whole responsibility is to take care of making sure they're out in front of the product developers, having all the new photos and all that kind of stuff. Yes?
I actually have a question. I don't know if I'm the only one who's going to ask this. I know for the most part you guys deal with like historically accurate paint schemes and all of that. Is there any plans in the future for like fantasy schemes?
Oh, that's actually a good question.
It's a great question. So, one of the interesting things is, you saw in the slide deck that we have, kit classics, operator, rivet counter, museum quality. We're going to insert Fox Valley between operator and rivet counter, and what Fox Valley will become is the brand that's almost rivet counter level detail, but it won't be as accurate. So we'll be able to do things like there's going to run of ET44s, which is GE's latest Tier 4 Gevo. That'll come and you'll be able to get it in like Rio Grande, Conrail, SP, some of the really big names back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. And then you'll also see us, when we're talking about the 40-2 and how it evolves through its life, we've always wanted to do the Wisconsin Southern 40th anniversary unit. We did some for them in Operator. It's a beautiful locomotive. But they made some changes to it which are almost impossible to do in model form. Like on a 40-2, there's a sand filler hatch at the very end of the long hood. They cut that off, sanded it flush, painted it. You'd never know it was there. And then midway down the long hood, they cut a notch in and they put the sand filler hatch there. Well, for us to do that in model form, that's about a $10,000 tooling change.
Holy cow.
Because we'd never get the money back. For most people, they'd be okay with that sand filler hatch. You'll see in the Fox Valley line, you'll see that 40-2 come. And you'll probably see some of the more short line railroads, the more general, I don't want to say generic, but short lines often they're 3rd, 4th, 5th hand owners. There's no way we're going to get to that kind of detail. So yeah, you'll see that in the Fox Valley brand.
Nice.
That's a good question. Yes?
One question. So in regards to the steam engines going forward, will there be different auxiliary tenders for those, like the one for 611 has, or 4449, were there different types of auxiliary tenders? Will those be a potential maybe item one day, or pretty much
stay tuned?
Okay.
Oh, good question.
Spare parts, like extra couplers, crab irons, rails, and then possibly, are you guys even thinking about doing like an undercoated version of some of these ones that painted themselves?
Ooh, another
there's a
good
couple
question.
questions in there. So number one, undecorated. For freight cars, we'll continue to offer undecorated. For locomotives, we are not. And the reason for that is there's a couple of reasons. Our factory cannot pick an undecorated locomotive correctly to save their life. They're set up to be finished goods. And we've tried and tried. And the problem, and the thing is, we spend so much time chasing down the right parts, and the factory does too, that it eats up all of our resources. And there's no instructions, right? You really have to know it, because we can't spend the time to create the instructions to build it. And here's why. I mentioned when we were talking about decoders, and so on this first run of Jeep 30s, there's probably at least a dozen body variations, even in those 6 road names. And So if we do an undecorated, you might get 18 pre-orders on it, maybe. And then when it gets closer to delivery, people come in and cancel undecorated for some reason, and you got you ordered 24, you got 12, you can't get rid of the other 12 to save your life, and the 12 you've got, those people have problems with what's in the box. So unless the factory can somehow prove to us that they can do it correctly, so we don't have to deal with, and the customer doesn't have to be without parts for months, I don't see us going down that road. Your second question is about parts. Well, that's a big question. So
That's a good question.
You will see us in the very near future with couplers, trucks, 088 wheel sets, that kind of stuff. I've had to do that all along, and I don't have the time. But we're bringing somebody in April that's going to be able to start doing some of that for us. We'll sell those kind of parts. I don't think you'll see us doing things like grab irons, sub-assemblies, things like that. The labor it takes to be able to put that in the computer system, photograph it, all that stuff, price it, it's just not there. But with that being said, we have parts. So if your locomotive takes, God forbid, it takes a header off the railroad, if you tell us, we'll take care of you. And that's a good thing to know, because even when things are well out of warranty, when people are honest with us, we take care of them, complimentary. And we've got tons of parts. I mean, working with something that you need, we don't have it for like scratch building, but we've got it to fix a model that might be broken. Yes, sir.
Having acquired Fox Valley and MTH tooling, are you centralizing production and assembly?
That's a good question. So, MTH, when we acquired the MTH tooling, MTH was closing down their factories, and that was their plan. Unfortunately for us, they ended up keeping one open in China. If we'd have left everything there, we could have been in production 2 years ago.
Oh, man.
We moved all that to our primary factory. With Fox Valley, we have 3 new factories coming online. 1 this year, probably 2 next year. So I'll hand it this way. Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is a business question. When you went shopping for factories to partner with, was China your only option? Or
Yes.
Are there other?
No, China's really it. China has the infrastructure for subcontractors who are going to have like your metal parts, some of the painting things.
That's
There's
crazy.
a whole substructure there. Nowhere else in the world is there. And there's also the skill set that's there, that skilled labor. That you could train it, of course, but it's not something you can just walk in and have it done.
That's
day one.
crazy.
A lot of good questions.
What do you think, guys?
Good.
That's good.
If you haven't got one yet, make sure you get a red gift bag out there. Make sure you get your name in the black box. Michelle will do some drawings. We'll hang around to answer questions. I know Michelle wants to shoot some more video and some photography. Make sure you get the rivet counter pen, the scale trains pen. You're welcome to pick up the models. I want to say thanks so much for the club and everybody tonight. I know you guys had a long day with the show. I want to wish you all the best. God bless and have a great night.